I don't know what was with the audio because at one point Conyer came in and Conyer said my audio sounded different than I do when I'm on the phone. I don't know what caused that. Twitter Spaces audio is so man. Oh my god.
You think Putin really thinks threatening nuclear war is a valid response to what? Being shafted by the EU when he was building the Nord Stream pipelines and was. You think Putin really thinks threatening nuclear war is a valid response to what? Being shafted by the EU when he was building the Nord Stream pipelines?
Clint Russell, host of Liberty Lockdown. I am a second-generation libertarian, big anti-war, non-interventionist guy. Obviously, a protege of the Scott Hortons and Dave Smiths of the world, and starting up a show with Luke Rudkowski tomorrow. So that's me.
Awesome. All right. Just a second. I'm just pulling up my notes. All right. So thank you both for joining me. So Clint and Vosh are going to be debating the war in Ukraine. Vosh, you will have the pros. Clint, you will have the cons. So just the rules. So as many of you who've been in my spaces know, I'm a free speech absolutist. So I don't have a lot of rules when it comes to these spaces in regards to what you can and can't say. So feel free to cuss, just, cuss respectfully, I guess, if that makes any sense. And try not to interrupt each other. I do understand that things can become heated in debates sometimes, so I simply ask for civility and patience if they do, and I'll intervene as needed if things go off track, drag on, become personal, etc. And finally, since this is a debate, I only ask that you gentlemen debate the topic at hand and try your best to avoid logical fallacies such as whataboutisms, non sequiturs, ad hominems, false dilemmas, inductive reasoning, etc. Do either of you have any questions?
No, I think that about sets it.
All right, awesome. All right,
Yeah, I'm good.
perfect. All right, so let's kick it off. Ukraine became a battleground in 2014 when Russia annexed Crimea and began arming and abetting the separatists in the Donbas region in the country's southeast. Russia's seizure of Crimea was the first time since World War II that the European state essentially had annexed a territory of another. And on the 24th of February of last year, Russia invaded Ukraine again in the escalation of the Russo-Ukrainian War. This last invasion, it's killed tens of thousands on both sides. Peace deals have been rejected, and there is no end in sight. So, Vosh, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah. Well, I want to say right off the bat that I'm always sympathetic to any anti-interventionist arguments when it comes to our foreign policy. The history of American intervention in foreign countries' affairs is not a great one, and I think there's plenty of reason to be skeptical generally. I've been against most everything America has done abroad, certainly when it comes to military engagement. I just think this is one of the rare examples where we're doing something decent. You know, I think that Americans and American government officials should prioritize Americans first, right? We have our own affairs to take care of. But we do live in a global society. There is no ignoring what goes on around the world, and we have to acknowledge the fact that our withdrawal from international engagement only cedes ground to others. I think that what fascism has done to Ukraine, both to its population and invasion, and what it's done to Russia in the form of the Putinist regime, is a net negative globally. I think it causes incredible harm around the world, and I think that it's good for us to support our ally by providing them arms and intel. There are, of course, ways in which this can go poorly, but at the moment, right now, I think that there is genuine benefit for the American and Ukrainian people, and God willing, the Russians down the line, the Russian citizens, that we see a Ukrainian victory in this conflict.
Vosh, do you think that we're on track for a Ukrainian victory at this point?
Well, it's a difficult road and it's hard to say. I think that Ukraine is doing better now than anyone expected in the onset of the conflict. I don't think they're doing as well as many people hoped. But I do think there is still a road to what many Ukrainians would call a victory, yes.
And would that victory entail maintaining the Donbass and Crimea?
I'm not sure. I mean, I can't see the future, of course. If they have the ability to retake Crimea or the Donbass, then that's certainly something they want to do, and I think they should be supported in doing so, depending on certain conditions. Whether or not they're going to be able to, though, it's a tough fight.
Yeah, well, it's a very tough fight at this point. Just to give kind of my overarching thesis about this is that this war was highly avoidable. There's a litany of both political and commentating professionals from the 1990s that knew that the expansion of NATO right up into kind of an encircling alliance on Russia's border, the old Baltic states would catalyze this conflict almost inevitably. Obviously, the timeline was unknowable, but just to give an example, I'm glad to hear Vosh say that he does disagree with much of our imperialist, past. I struggle to understand why this is different, but I'm sure we'll get into that. The U.S. since 1991 and the end of the USSR has bombed and invaded a litany of countries. I'll just run down a quick list. You have Iraq, obviously, then Bosnia, Afghanistan, Iraq once again, Pakistan, Somalia, Kenya, Libya, Iraq again, Yemen, Syria. So that's 10 wars. That doesn't include the nations that we sanctioned and a dozen color revolutions that we funded. I could go through the list of color revolutions that were also largely funded by our State Department and fomented through the CIA, oftentimes Yugoslavia, Georgia, Ukraine, Kyrgyzstan, Lebanon, Belarus, Moldova, and then Iran. It's my opinion that the U.S. is the empire of the world, at least in modern history, and this is playing directly into the Project for a New American Century kind of Dick Cheney worldview, and it is not to the benefit of the American people. It ultimately is leading us towards what could amount to a hot nuclear war, or if by some miracle, a non-nuclear World War III. It has also driven Russia, which repeatedly requested to be added to NATO. It has driven them into the arms of China, which I think is not to the benefit of the American people. It is breaking apart kind of the unipolar moment into a bipolar one, and bipolar both in terms of physical, but also in terms of psychological. It's becoming increasingly dangerous. And while I am personally grateful to see the unipolar moment ending, just simply because I don't think that the U.S. government has behaved in a way that is worthy or morally befitting a unipolar hegemon. It is also a moment of great peril in that there's going to be a kind of a reshuffling of the power dynamics on Earth. You have the BRICS alliance, which is now creating a competing currency system that looks to undermine or at least go head to head with the U.S. dollar. Given that the primary export of the U.S. economy for the past 30 years has been our inflation, that will be truly catastrophic. So the risk-reward benefit on this is completely lopsided, and I apologize for going on for so long, but that is my operating thesis.
So I think the problem here is that we're running into the same rigmarole. First, and I hear this all the time, you talk about a bunch of other conflicts. Well, this isn't those conflicts. This is this one. You talk about, you play up the idea that it's Western behavior that's causing a breakdown in the unipolar world. I disagree. The idea that Russia was trying to join NATO right before this conflict, Russia briefly bantied with joining NATO, and that was something that we entertained. But it didn't play out for a wide variety of reasons. Ultimately, this breakdown in communication, this failure in our international diplomacy, it is a product of the fact that Russia's regime has pursued an ultra-nationalist, fascist agenda. Like the idea that this all gets laid at our feet, it sounds almost like an America last attitude. You talk about it's not beneficial to the American people, but then what do? You play up the idea that BRICS is really going to establish like a contrary economic bloc, the idea that we're the ones to blame for the breakdown in diplomacy when Russia is the one that is constantly and nonstop engaged in threats, both nuclear and across borders. Russia is the one that actually engaged in the invasion. No, I think ultimately, when you look at all the problems that we've had with Russia and you draw them down to a common denominator, it's pretty clear. The problem is with Russia. It's with Putin. And if we want to deal with these issues, we have to help the Russian people arrive at different leadership. Now, that may sound harsh or interference oriented, but hey, What's the reason why we have no ability whatsoever to engage in any kind of diplomatic relations with North Korea? Well, it's certainly not the United States, right? Their government relies on that distance. It's a strategy for them. And that's the problem that we're dealing with here, too. So, yeah, I say we have to acknowledge who's to blame here, and we have to leave all of that aside when it comes to the real material issue of assisting our ally. You know, Ukraine, even if everything said here was true, Ukraine doesn't deserve to suffer and to have its population annihilated, its land taken, just because, what, 30 years ago, America pursued a strategy with NATO that Putin didn't like?
Well, let me start by pushing back against one thing you said. You're basically endorsing the toppling of Putin. I assume you mean through CIA means. I don't know exactly what you're hinting at, but I believe that to be a truly psychotic perspective, given that they still have 6,000 nuclear warheads and some of the most advanced arsenal on Earth. Not to mention their submarine fleet. It's an extraordinarily dangerous thing to push for. But on top of that, this belief that you're going to topple Putin and then have some sort of liberty-oriented, non-fascistic, ruler rise up in his stead is largely delusional. But also, if you look at the other history of nations that we've toppled over the past 20 years, you don't see that. That's not what comes about. So, what is it in this circumstance that makes you finally believe that the U.S.'s decisions in this process to replace him with someone more befitting of our preferences would actually come to pass? I just don't see it.
I didn't say we should topple him or imply anything with the CIA. It's a fascist regime, and Putin is banking on success in Ukraine. It's a centerpiece to his current
You
domestic strategy.
you said we should help the Russian people find a way to replace him. What does that mean?
He's a dictator. If he grows sufficiently unpopular that people oust him, then that's the responsibility and the right of the Russian people. I don't like autocrats, but I'm not saying the CIA should do that. That's the right of the Russian people. And the Russian people right now are blanketed nonstop with pro-Russian propaganda. I mean, it is completely insular. I mean, you see this in many countries where their entire internal propaganda network is oriented around oppositional foreign policy, North Korea, Iran, to name a few. I think the only thing we can really do there is we can, well, for one, not let our ally get invaded and conquered. I think that would be good. But also, a failure militarily will probably be detrimental to Putin's regime, makes him look bad. I mean, he plays the strongman card, doesn't he?
Okay, so your point is that if our support of the Ukrainian military, if they were to push back Russia, that would be enough to potentially topple him.
I think that it would contribute towards his unpopularity. We're already seeing signs of weakness from him. That business with Kadyrov, and then later with the Wagner group, where Lukashenko had to step in, the whole thing made Putin look pretty weak. And right now, of course, he's running a deficit war economy. He's providing pretty strong financial incentives to soldiers. The economy is keeping up as it is now. A lot of this has to do with the fact that Russia has a very small economy, but a very large net export market for oil and natural gas, which,
Right.
Right, economically, it's complicated to like unseat stuff like that. But I think that narratively, when you take a look at how Putin's talked about his country, it's been all about glorious revival and opposition to the West. But we're not invading Russia, and I don't want to invade Russia, and it would be a silly idea considering all the nukes. I think that this invasion of Ukraine is a desperate bid to try to reclaim a bit of former glory. And I think that he should lose, not only because it is right, but because it might destabilize a strong man's, boasting and power grabbing.
Well, you and I agree that this is a bit of a desperate bid, but I think that we should be respectful of that desperation, particularly. God damn it. Oh yeah, I think we should be respectful of the desperation that they're in. I think that Crimea and Sevastopol in particular is viewed by Putin and his cadre of elites as being existential to their survival. Whether they're right or wrong, they perceive it to be that. And I think that people don't like to do this, but I think that if the shoe were on the other foot, everyone would expect the U.S. empire to react in the exact same fashion. If we only had one year-round warm water port and it was in Tijuana, and all of the same confluence of events came to pass, undoubtedly the U.S. government would invade Mexico and claim the Tijuana port for themselves. So it's just a level of hypocrisy to dictate 6,000 miles from our border that we can have both the moral authority, much less the gall to tell them that they shouldn't be doing this. Now, I will agree with you wholeheartedly that this war is tragic, and I absolutely do not support Putin in his invasion. But I think, one, it's a losing effort, and two, it is not in American interests to be doing so. And ultimately, you said that Putin is running a deficit budget to support this war. Well, so the fuck are we. So there's a many reasons that I think that this is not America's place, and they do not have the moral authority any longer to be dictating to the global stage what others need to be doing.
I think you're using a lot of morally loaded language. I'm not saying America should dictate anything. Ukraine wants to defend itself, and they are our ally, and we are helping. And also, frankly, I don't really care if America's done bad stuff in the past. I don't think that means that I should do bad stuff now. Like, I'd be like, well, America's done bad things in the past, so we shouldn't have assisted in defeating the Nazis. Or like, well, no, okay. Maybe America as a country is self-interested and hypocritical, but my personal justifications, I think, in this case are pretty consistent. Now, I agree with. I'm being told by well-meaning listeners that my voice sounds terrible through Twitter Spaces.
I have no idea why, and there's nothing I can do about it.
It sounds fine on my end.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. If you now you talked about like Russia being a dangerous bear to poke, and I understand that. The problem I have is that I think it's worse in the other direction. If Putin gets a win and takes over all of Ukraine, now they share a border with Poland. That's dangerous. I mean, if we meaningfully want to fix this, right? If we want to destabilize, or sorry, not destabilize, de-escalate the conflict.
Escalate.
Yeah. If we want to de-escalate the conflict, we cannot let Russia border more NATO countries. Russia does not have the most self-control when it comes to engagement with its borders, especially when it comes to former Soviet states. I think it's necessary that they lose here for exactly the reason you cite, that they need to not be interfered with. Because the worst thing you can do with somebody like Putin is let him win, is let him get what he wants over and over. With Chechnya, with Georgia, with Crimea, he builds and he builds and he builds. And then what are you teaching him? Well, I mean, ultimately, you're teaching him that he can get what he wants with violence. And I think that it's essential that he not. If nothing else, Ukraine is a quagmire, a desperate one that has cost the lives of many soldiers on both sides, and that's horrible. But it's a war Putin started. And I think that we face the potential of much more conflict down the line if he gets the impression this is a consistent winning tactic for his ratings.
Well, again, I just don't know how Americans can view Russia and say if they get wins, that'll set a terrible precedent, given that the nature of our empire over the past 30 years has been truly catastrophic for the globe, at least the people that we've invaded and bombed into oblivion. So why is it that the American well, let's actually circle back to another point. I think that well, certainly the invasion was ultimately Putin's decision. You can't disconnect the catalyzing factors that led to his decision-making process. You have a litany of examples of him from 2008 all the way up until 2022 or 21, where he's declaring repeatedly, Ukraine is the red line. You have our State Department that's acknowledging it in confidential wires to Condoleezza Rice. They knew that this was the red line, and yet still Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, in the 6 months lead up to his decision to ultimately invade, were still talking openly about adding them to NATO. If given that fact, given that our government knew, given that they knew that this was the reddest of red lines, given that they knew that the Russian people also would galvanize around Putin in this decision because they also view NATO or view Ukraine being added to NATO as an existential threat to their survival, how is it that we can then turn around and say, well, this is all Putin's fault, and ultimately we should, risk world war to push him back?
Putin does not get to decide for a foreign military alliance, whether or not another country gets to apply. Application to NATO from Ukraine hasn't really been on the table for a while because they're currently engaged in civil conflict after 2014. Like, it's not really on the table. But if you set the standard where Russia, an autocratic dictatorship, has the ability to determine for NATO who NATO considers, no, don't buy into his lies. Putin did not invade Ukraine because he was afraid of a NATO alliance. I think that's ridiculous. I think that's ahistorical. The odds of Ukraine joining NATO went down after 2014 because of the ongoing engagement within the country. This isn't some panic fear thing. You said it yourself. America would invade Mexico if they were looking for their only warm water port. Well, that's what this is for Russia. They want the land, they want the zeal, but this is not really about threat. Of course they play up the threat. That's all they do. Go listen to like Iran's public broadcasts, and what do you hear? Every single day, Iran says, oh, America does this, America did that. Now, did America do bad things in Iran? Sure, yeah, we did. But in 2023, right now, is every specific government decision from Iran a direct consequence of us? No. They use us as a scapegoat. We're an easy thing to blame. We're an easy thing to point at and go, okay, maybe I can't justify this behavior on its own merits, but I sure as hell can say that America is the one responsible. That's what I'm concerned about. We're kind of playing into the narrative a bit. Like, imagine what it would say about not just America, but Ukraine, if Russia, the country Ukraine is afraid of, would be able to take them off the list for self-defense. I mean, that would be, why not give them everything at that point?
Well, I mean, so you acknowledge that America would do that, but you don't think that Russia should be allowed to, and America should be the one dictating that they don't.
No,
I mean,
I oppose
it's
both.
essentially the Monroe Doctrine kind of conceptual framework. But instead of our Monroe Doctrine, it seems that you're advocating that our Monroe Doctrine spans the entire globe, and that they have no right to dictate the policy of their bordering nations.
No, wait, hold on. No, Russia does not have the right to dictate the policy of its bordering nations. Certainly, I don't know why you keep implying that I'm okay with all of the bad stuff that America does.
Well, because you're advocating for America to do this. So
no. No. Wait, I fundamentally reject this framing. Ukraine was invaded. They request America for aid. That is not America dictating the rules or the boundaries abroad. That is not us exercising moral authority.
That's not true. You know that there was peace negotiations that were happening in the early stages of this invasion and in the lead up to it that were shuttled by Boris Johnson at the explicit direction of the State Department. So how can you say that we are not dictating policy there, especially given that the outcome of this war is almost certainly going to be what that peace negotiation would have ultimately yielded?
First of all, I'm not Boris Johnson. He wasn't even he's not even an American, so I don't know how I'm meant to account for that. But what's more, when it comes to this invasion, we are not the ones dictating that Ukraine be invaded. That was Russia. And we are not the ones who initiated the request for aid. That was Ukraine. We are providing aid to an ally. I don't like this constant, well, how can you as an American? I'm not an American alone. I'm Vosh. I have my own opinions and beliefs. And if America was to invade Mexico for a warm water port, I would take issue with that as well. Great issue. I would be thrown in jail for treason, the extent to which I personally would disagree with that conflict. But if you're to argue this, well, how do you have the moral authority? What you're essentially saying is that nobody has the right to push for anything good internationally because every country's done bad things. And I just
I'm specifically saying that the United States government doesn't have that right. If I framed it as if it was you as an American, then I retract that. I was saying how is it that the American government has that authority to do so, given that they would do the exact same thing in their area of influence, but instead of just realizing that the Monroe Doctrine and their area of influence is in this hemisphere, we're applying our own, moral dictates across the entire planet. It's just totally unreasonable and hypocritical on a scale that's you have to be able to recognize.
I think that it's insane and nonsensical to Ukraine requests aid because our ally is being invaded, and for us to go, oh no, sorry, we've invaded countries in the past, so we can't help you not be invaded by fascists. It's ridiculous. I feel like the obsession with pointing fingers and accusing people of hypocrisy is born out of an unwillingness to engage with the actual moral conundrum. Has America done bad things? Yes, and it always will. Nation states will do bad things. I mean, I'm a libertarian. I don't believe that we can ever expect reliably good behavior when it comes to nation states under any circumstances. But I still support the US intervening to stop the Nazis. I still support the United States, honestly, the number of things that it's done abroad that are good is pretty small. So I'm just going to stop with the Nazis. But I support
On,
that. And I support.
on what libertarian framework are you basing your support for interventionist policies, regardless of the moral, quandary?
Providing aids when requested by an ally because they're being invaded by fascists is a classic. We're helping them against a violation of the non-aggression principle. Ukraine did not invade Russia. Russia invaded Ukraine. Ukraine is not capable of defending itself because Russia's a big country, and well, Ukraine was pretty weak and young.
But this
So
is
we,
still
as friends, help.
an intervention. This is still an interventionist position. So I'm just trying to nail down how intervention from a libertarian framework makes sense, because I'm unfamiliar with it, just to be honest.
Do you think that libertarianism means that you can't have any kind of international negotiation? Because by that definition, all negotiation and diplomacy would be intervention, which it technically is.
Yeah, no, I would argue that entangling alliances are both foundational to the American framework, but also to libertarianism.
So wait, you think entangling alliances are a good thing?
No, I'm
Okay,
arguing against them.
I misheard. Well, it seems to me then that you're pro-war. International alliance and diplomacy have been the most effective tools for preventing warfare that the world has ever seen. I mean, countries used to spend like centuries at war with everyone next to them. We live in an era of unprecedented peace, and a lot of that is because we rely on international trade and negotiation and trading blocs in order to encourage countries to get what they want through non-war means. And I think that is all interventionist, right? I mean, us having trade deals and negotiations with other countries, we are intervening, to be sure. But I mean, it's better
Wait,
than war.
how is trading with another nation intervention? I'm lost.
Because trade has to be facilitated through international trade agreements. Corporations don't usually just do it on their own. It's usually something that gets built and brought about by the nation states working with each other to some extent as well. And as long as they're doing that, they are shaping each other's policies. But if it prevents war, I am all for it.
Well, in terms of trade, I don't perceive that to be intervention at all.
And we're trading them with arms.
Well, not really. I mean, we're giving them the money to acquire those arms.
Well, a lot of the times we're just giving them like some of our surplus equipment. God knows we have tons of it. But that's a trade. It's a nation providing something in exchange for something else. In this case, sometimes it's for debt, but sometimes this is just,
Bosch, I know you're smart enough to know that when they give them the old arsenal, it's just so that they can then turn back on the Mike complex and replenish that stock. So you can't possibly think that we're doing that out of the kindness of our heart, right?
I don't think any nation does anything for the kindness of our heart. I think it's in the geopolitical interest of the United States to see Russia lose in Ukraine. I also think that it's in the interest of Ukraine to see Russia lose, and I think it's morally right for Russia to lose. So, no, I don't think it's out of the goodness of our heart.
Okay. Well, I will agree with you that the entangling alliances, particularly NATO, has decreased, the World War phenomenon that we saw with obviously 1 and 2. But I would argue that is more a product of the nuclear arsenal that came about, at the tail end of World War II. And I would also argue that by intervening consistently and having all these entangling alliances, what we're in fact doing is not allowing local skirmishes to be settled on their own terms, but rather building up to the potential for a cataclysmic war that endangers all humanity on Earth. And I don't perceive that to be the benefit of humanity. Quite the contrary. I think it's extraordinarily dangerous.
I mean, I don't think there are any local skirmishes. I don't think that's a real thing, right? If you want local skirmishes, you can go to like Africa, right, where you have like the Sudan conflict and everything. I mean, that exists, sure. But when it comes to war, war is war, and a lot of countries have nukes these days. don't think the absence of alliances would improve the situation. I think what we need to do is make sure that everyone is playing the same game. We need to essentially break Russia and Saudi Arabia to a large extent too, countries that maintain their economies based on resource trading. We want everyone to be playing the same econ game, right? Like the reason why America and China will never really go to war with each other, we'll see how the Taiwan thing plays out, but I really doubt they will, is because we're so economically codependent. Russia is not economically dependent on anyone because their economy is so small that it's easy to internally maintain, and they just sell all their natural resources. They don't need to engage in like a complicated network of mutual exchange. As long as we're all playing the same game, we're safe. And Putin's regime is a major impediment to that. I mean, we talk about the irresponsibility of the West when it comes to our NATO preferences. Sure, fine, fine. But like, Putin threatens nuclear war every other week. And why? Right? Why? Because Ukraine next to them may in 20 years join NATO? No, because like North Korea, the screaming of tin pot dictators is a way to maintain constant internal fervor, drum up support, keep people angry and scared, so they don't think of voting in Navalny or a more democratic leader. And the only way to fix this, you got to arrange the conditions in such a way that there are fewer world leaders like Putin, and giving them victories and letting them handle their local squabbles without international, engagement. That does what they want. That's what they want.
That perspective totally diminishes the efforts of Russia post USSR, where they attempted to essentially immerse themselves in the European economy. Every step of the way, they've been given the cold shoulder. It's really tragic that when they consist. I mean, even Putin himself said, "We don't want to be in alliance with the Chinese. We are European. Accept us as such." And they've been told repeatedly no. And when he's threatening nuclear war, I mean, you laugh it off. I take it quite seriously. If he views this to be as existential as I believe he believes it is, well, then we ought to be listening. And that also includes the expansion of NATO, which we promised repeatedly we would not expand. And then we did, to the tune of 20 nations and thousands of miles encircling their entire border. It's just not anything that the American government would ever permit to happen to them. But when Russia does it, you describe him as a tin pot dictator and a fascist and a lunatic and all these other things. And it's just not fair to the Russian people. It truly is not.
You don't bring it back to the Russian people. He's a dictator, all right? And also, there was no correlation between half the stuff you just said. First of all, even if he's gotten sidelined by the EU community, cry about it. He's threatening nuclear war. You think this is the language you're engaging in unwittingly appeases him. This is appeasement rhetoric. If you were to say,
come on. Why is he doing that? Why is he doing that, though?
Why does North Korea do it? Why do countries do this? They do it because it drums up internal support. North Korea isn't under threat of being invaded every day. They threaten nuking Japan. Do you think Japan's going to invade North Korea? No, of course not. Tin pot dictators do this. We see them do this. It's not new. You really think, like, this is you playing into his dynamic. You're doing his propaganda. You think Putin really thinks threatening nuclear war is a valid response to what? Being shafted by the EU when he was building the Nord Stream pipelines and was going to make trillions off of selling to them?
I think it's extraordinarily reasonable given the encirclement strategy that the U.S. empire is utilizing against the Russian. What?
What encirclement?
No. What?
What encirclement?
I mean, we have our military, our Navy on his eastern seaboard, and then we also have NATO alliance that's encircling him on the west.
Wait, where?
What? What do you mean where?
Yeah, okay, so Russia is the largest country on Earth by far. It is so large that you could accidentally encircle Russia simply by existing on Earth in multiple locations. It is massive. What you're describing, I assume, is our presence in Japan and our presence in Europe. First of all, this is hardly encirclement. We don't encircle them towards their largest borders on the north and the south. To their south, they find allies and unwitting compatriots, and to the north, they find nothing but the cold, frozen wastes they seem to enjoy living in.
We're encircling them in the most hospitable and habitable areas of their landmass, and you're dismissing that as if it's
That's-
just some rantings of a lunatic.
That's not. First of all, okay, yeah, it is rantings of a lunatic for a couple of reasons that you won't be able to answer. First of all, nobody is thinking about invading Russia. The idea that he's operating out of some kind of legitimate fear of the
I agree with you.
territorial sovereignty, well, then there's no reason to be threatening nukes, and the encirclement thing is BS. Encirclement implies
the reason it's
preemptive
so
strategy.
existential. The reason it's so existential to them is because the nuclear deterrent strategy only works if they actually have some time to react, and we're diminishing that time. We're increasing the chances of a human error, a misread of the radar. Like, this is all extraordinarily dangerous, and you're dismissing
we're not.
it.
Wait, we haven't been moving nukes towards Russia since the Cold War. We've moved nuclear capabilities away. The idea that there's some First of all, the idea that we have moved nukes so close to Russia that we could stop them from retaliating when they have the largest country on Earth and they have nuclear silos that are so heavily dotted across the landscape that it would be impossible to hit them all is ludicrous. You just said they don't fear invasion, but now you're implying that we're setting up for some kind of first strike, like 2024.
No, I'm not implying that.
What threat justifies Putin threatening to nuke the world? What justifies that? You say it's a legitimate fear. What makes that fear legitimate?
Because we are increasing our alliance territory on their western border. And they have explicitly said that it's the reddest of red lines for them. You dismiss it out of hand.
We're not allowed to form alliances. So wait, we form alliances that they don't like, and in response, they legitimately fear military aggression enough to threaten to nuke the world.
It's not just the fear of a first strike. It's not just the fear of invasion. It's also the fear of not being able to participate in the global economic system, which they have great reason to fear that, given that they've been kicked off of SWIFT and ultimately had sanctions and a whole litany of basically the entire. We fired a financial nuclear arsenal at them already. So yes, they are very concerned about this, as they should be. That wasn't them. That was our response to their invasion.
Yeah, that was them. Yes, you can't blame us for kicking them off SWIFT when they invaded Ukraine.
Oh, I can blame us. I can blame us when we knew that adding Ukraine into NATO was the reddest of red lines.
They have not been added into NATO. You keep going back to that, but it's
because you have the President of the United States openly stating it. You have the Vice President of the United States openly stating it, stating that the door is wide open. They said it. Yeah. 6 months leading up to it. That's not an acceptable position to have. The American government would never allow for that with anything in our hemisphere, and
Russia
you know it.
Does not quit with the hypocrisy arguments. They're weak-minded. Russia does not get
That's not
dictate.
true. It's valid.
They're weak-minded.
It's not weak-minded. It's valid.
Russia does not get to dictate whether or not the countries they're eyeing for invasion are allowed to seek defense by joining other military alliances. And the idea that Russia's been trying to get up with the EU, as if Yanukovych in Ukraine, their puppet leader who got ousted after he tried to become a dictator, he got ousted in Euromaidan after he abandoned the EU to join.
Yeah, if history started 15 years ago, that point might be valid, but it didn't. It started in 1991 when USSR fell. I'm talking about from 1991 all the way up until 2005. You had multiple leaders of Russia that were attempting to become more in alignment with the EU economy, and they were laughed off repeatedly.
They were not laughed off. It's more complicated than that. Also, Russia was making bank off of selling natural gas and oil, the largest pipeline in the world for Russia, meeting all of Europe's energy needs. And they fucked it up. They it up by invading because Putin couldn't keep his hands to himself. They had a pathway. Now, am I saying we're blameless? No, of course I'm not. This isn't about defending America. It's about the fact that Putin's fear-mongering, his I have no choice but to threaten ending the world, is bullshit. And I think, and by the way, I think it's very cowardly of you to accept that framing when you are correct in accusing the United States of being generally quite bad. You're willing to acknowledge the US has done this and this and this, but then when it comes to Russia threatening to, again, nuke the world, then it's like, oh, well, how could he not when Ukraine might have joined NATO in 20 years? I think that's bullshit, and I think you're playing clever for it.
I'm not at all okay with it, and sure, it is cowardly. I don't want to die in a nuclear war, Vosh.
But
So
you are making it worse. You are justifying the logic that the person who would fire the nukes is engaging.
no, I'm explaining the logic, not justifying it. That's
He's
different.
lying. He wants Ukraine for the land and the territory and the clout. He wants it because strongmen need invasions. Saddam Hussein did the exact same thing. Strongmen need invasions to justify their power. But you're accepting his framing at face value, which is what he wants, which is
I'm not.
a
I'm not
pro-war
accepting his
position.
framing at face value. I'm accepting the fact that his framing is supported by many of the leaders in the United States government, including our State Department, for 30 years. Vosh, you can't
Wait,
dismiss it.
our State Department has said that he needs to threaten to nuke the world because
No,
Ukraine may or may not join.
that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying
But that's what he's saying.
his framing about expanding NATO and that Ukraine was the reddest of red lines was supported by our State Department. This is not some myth that I'm concocting that's some sort of Russian propaganda attempt. It's a fact. It's a fact, and you know it.
It's a fact that he said it. I don't think we should respect it. Why should Russia get to decide whether or not the ally they're looking to, or the neighbor they're looking to invade, join another military alliance? Do you want to give them that next? Maybe next they'll say, now our red line is that Poland is part of NATO. Poland is part of historical Soviet territory. And the fact that we now border Poland, now that we've conquered Ukraine, is a red line for us. If
Bosh,
the West doesn't do something about this, then we might get angry. Like, would you give them that?
the reality of their demands before the invasion is essentially what we're looking at as the outcome of this tragic war where hundreds of thousands of people needlessly died. And it's all because the peace treaty was shuttled by Boris Johnson at the direction of the State Department.
Incorrect.
And yes, it's true. And
It's not correct.
ultimately what is going to be the outcome of this is that the Donbass region is going to end up being autonomous. Crimea is going to stick with Russia, and that's going to be the end of this.
So
and
you
when that
just
happens,
avoided my framing right there. I just said, like, would you accept it if they started going, "Oh, Poland is a part of NATO. That's our historical territory. This is our new red line."
I would like to see the United States government exit NATO personally. I think that it is.
No, answer the question. If Putin says, after successfully conquering Ukraine, now Poland is our red line, this is our territory, actually, would you go, oh, well, yeah, I guess it is like historical Soviet territory. And to be fair, we did say in that one time that never got recorded on paper that we would not move NATO over to Poland. So
my position will be consistent in that I do not believe the United States government should have entangling alliances, nor should it be intervening in the politics 6,000 miles away.
You're America last. Yeah.
No, I'm America first. I'm a non-interventionist. You're not a libertarian. You don't understand non-intervention at all.
Bro, you hate the American people. You're like, America should give up power everywhere, and Russia should get to invade whoever they want. Russia should get Ukraine. They should get Poland. Give them the Baltic states too. Because after all, if America ever did anything as audacious as, I don't know,
that's an absurd. That's an absurd framing of my argument. These nations all have a right to defend themselves. They all have a right to defend themselves.
But we shouldn't help our allies.
Correct.
Okay, well then that's an America last position because Russia does bully its allies into helping. Belarus, they're puppet states. You would give the world to Russia because you want to see America weak. You want to see us cowering. Listen to earlier, you propped up BRICS as though it was like a real thing. Like, yeah, BRICS.
It is.
This isn't America first. This is like, you're like, oh, America better watch out. China is 3,000 years ahead of us. Look at this like video of children learning how to swap magazines.
I'm not saying any of this. I don't even know where you're pulling this from.
Because it seems to me like all of your America first positions seem to involve us ceding all power on the world stage to a fascist in exchange for literally nothing. Like you're asking America to, so we're giving power to fascists, gaining nothing, losing alliances, losing economic clout. How is this America first?
How is it libertarian to believe to the contrary, that the United States empire should be dictating policies 6,000 miles away?
We're not. Ukraine asked free association.
Bullshit, we're not,
with
Bosh.
Ukraine
Bullshit, we're
wanted
not.
free association with us. They asked us for aid, and we accepted their contract. Their NAP was violated.
Are you denying that we shuttled the peace treaty early on? Are you denying that?
If you seriously think Boris Johnson has the ability, all he did was go over and suggest they not. No, he doesn't. That's not how it works. The Ukrainian
I do believe that. I do believe that Ukraine would not be in this war if it weren't for the West support. So ultimately, they get to dictate peace or war.
The Ukrainian people overwhelmingly support Zelensky and his continuing the conflict. All like one Westerner going over there and giving advice is not the same as us dictating policy.
Well, that's a very naive perspective, Vosh.
Yeah, because I don't think you think the Ukrainians are real people. It's like tens of
No, I
millions
think
of
they're real people. I
Ukrainians.
just think that they're powerless in the face of the Russian army.
But they
If
voted
not
for
for the West,
Zelensky.
yeah, if
They-
not for the West, though, they would have no chance in this fight, and you know it. That's why you
That's what
support
allies
the.
are for. Yeah, and you support them being bowled over and murdered and raped by fascists, and I support
No,
us helping our
I
allies.
support not catalyzing these invasions in the first place by dismissing the concerns of a country with 6,000 nuclear weapons.
Yeah,
If you had
this is
actually, if
appeasement
you had
rhetoric.
actually
Yeah.
listened to their concerns, if you had actually listened to their concerns, there's a distinct possibility that this invasion never happens.
Well,
But you dismiss
we
that.
can't turn back time. Now we're dealing with this. I think that your framing of this is totally incorrect, by the way. The idea that this was because of NATO. I think Putin's just flatly lying, so people like you will pick up that rhetoric and pretend that
Yeah.
he's on some
So
kind of,
so
like,
is our State Department.
anti-imperialist
So is
mission.
Condoleezza Rice. They're
Yeah,
all lying,
yes,
Bob.
yes, I'm aware, but I'm not trying to. But you're the one repeating State Department lies. The Russian State Department.
What? No, get the fuck out of here, dude.
Yeah,
That's
the Kremlin.
Condoleezza
Yes,
Rice,
yes, you
dude.
are. Yes, you're like word for word. You're
These are
like, I think-
cables from our
I
State
think that-
Department, the United
I think-
States State
I
Department.
think that Comrade Putin is correct in his glorious fight against U.S. imperialism, and I think that NATO expansionism is to blame. Like, you are repeating State Department lies. You're just doing it for a different government.
That's the U.S. government that acknowledged this repeatedly. I don't know what you're talking about.
The U.S. government believes that Ukraine not being denied NATO membership off the bat is the reason why Russia invaded, or the U.S. government has acknowledged that Russia has said that's a red line, because those are two very different things.
The U.S. has said that it's a red line for Russia.
They say it's a red line. Should we allow foreign
it sure
dictators to
it sure
determine
looks
all of
like
our
it was,
behavior?
huh? It sure looks like it was a red line, huh?
No, because it's been 30 years of us possibly having Ukraine as part of NATO in the future. So what? Just any time in the past 30 years this might have happened?
No, it was after the Maidan Revolution, that the coup, that they ultimately took a much more antagonistic stance, including taking Crimea.
Yeah. So, but Ukraine has been potentially in the future eligible for NATO membership since the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Why now?
Yes, because they were manipulating the politicians in Ukraine, and then after the coup, they didn't have a friendly politician there anymore, so they realized that it was imminent threat. They took Crimea, they took Sebastopol, and then,
Oh,
Bob's
so
your
wait,
uncle.
so it sounds then like the real red line for Russia was not controlling Ukraine, and the moment they no longer had, well, okay. So if you agree
Correct.
then that it's not about Russia actually being worried about its safety, and it's just about politically controlling its neighbors, then I agree with you completely.
Well, it's not entirely that, but yes, that's a huge part of it for sure.
So they're just a bully that wants to control their neighbors, and we, the United States, are supposed to abandon our allies because they want to bully harder. What is that? What is
Yeah,
this?
yeah. The U.S. government should should probably stop bullying the entire planet if that's
Yes,
the case.
I agree. I am principally against bullying, but you seem to be in favor of it as long as the U.S.
No.
isn't the one doing it.
No, I'm saying that the U.S. government doesn't have the moral authority to be bullying
Who
back.
cares? I don't give a shit about moral authority. It's either things are good or bad.
Well, I do give a shit because it's ultimately my tax dollars or the inflationary, destruction of my life savings that is funding this.
That doesn't have anything
And
to do
it's
with
also
moral
risking.
authority.
It's also risk. What?
That's not a moral authority issue. We're just arguing over whether it's good or bad. I don't care if America has done 999 bad things. If they do a good thing, I'll defend the good thing. I'll keep at it too.
Well, you can argue that it's a good thing in defending the ally, but you'd have to then acknowledge the bad thing, which was catalyzing this war and this conflict in the first place, which you won't do.
Yeah, I don't think we did. I think that Russia was pretty much always going to head down this road as long as Putin was the leader. When strongmen are leaders of countries that don't have much economic exchange with other nations, we're pretty much like, you've set yourself up for failure right there.
If Russia were to have fomented a revolution or a coup to have a less friendly political establishment in Mexico, would you find that to be an acceptable thing to do?
What coup?
The Maidan Revolution. According to George, what's his name, Friedman of Stratfor, it's the most obvious coup in the history of the world.
I don't agree with that at all. The Ukrainian people didn't like their leadership.
Well, I agree with you. They didn't like their leadership, but it's a little bit more complicated than that. If you
Well,
want to make it, if you want
I
to make it
agree.
as simplistic as possible to fit your framework, that's fine. But the rest of us dealing with the reality of the situation are going to acknowledge that
If
this war, it was catalyzed by U.S. intervention abroad,
no,
6,000 miles away, unnecessarily. They don't have the moral authority to dictate what Russia
so
should do in response.
again,
They are
no,
they. This is what they
no, it
wanted.
wasn't.
This is what they wanted from the jump.
No, it's not even remotely. All of this was caused by Russia, and you're so like hell bent on
All of it
defending
was
their State
caused by
Department.
Russia, as
Yeah.
John
So
McCain, the warmonger
no,
of
no, no. Stop. See,
warmongers,
this is what I mean.
is standing
This
at the
is what I
Maidan
mean.
Revolution with a
This is what I.
microphone,
This
advocating,
is
saying, "America stands with you."
this is what I mean by you being America last. You're like those white guys who keep bragging to everyone in earshot about
No,
how
I'm
much they hate
America
white people.
first. I think
No,
John McCain's a fucking nightmare of a human being.
hate America because you are so desperate to blame every element
No,
on this.
I hate
But
our
no, no, no.
empire. I
Let me
love
finish.
America.
Let me finish. America did not cause the Euromaidan. Russia tried to have a pet dictatorship over in Ukraine by allowing Yanukovych to enforce the black protest laws. What was it, Black Tuesday? They
Yeah,
encouraged him to do so. This is
yeah.
Russia doing this.
And
It
and then
seems like
we replaced him with our puppet
no,
regime.
wait,
It's the same. It's the same bullshit.
no. See, this is how you keep making up because you hate America. You want to blame us. You want to accept moral fault for everything. The
Bosh, it is such a
Ukrainian
bizarre framing to say that I hate
people.
America because I don't
You
like our
do.
empire.
No,
I
no,
don't
no.
like our
You
empire.
just don't like America. You seek to blame it for everything, like the
No,
self-apologetic white man or the self-hating male feminist. You take America. No, that's what I mean. It's pathetic. America did not create the regime
you're
after
fun, man.
Yanukovych was removed. Not even remotely.
You're
The
fun.
Ukrainian people.
I like you.
You're getting upset because you don't like this framing. The
No, I
Ukrainian
don't. I
people.
don't like the framing of
The
saying that I
Ukraine.
hate America because I don't like our empire. Oh, no, let me
The
finish. Let me
Ukrainian. No, no,
finish.
no. You
Let me
haven't let me
finish
finish.
telling you how
haven't.
un-American you are.
You haven't let me finish in ages, man. Yanukovych was outed because he was a puppet dictator, and the Ukrainian people have consistently engaged in higher levels of democratic engagement.
Yeah, and
What?
the
No, no,
puppet,
no. I wasn't finished. Of democratic engagement and lowered levels of corruption constantly. Now, your goal here is to promote Russian state propaganda by blaming every change on America. Everything. America did the coup because McCain spoke one time at an event. Oh, actually, America was the one who shot down the peace treaty because Boris Johnson went over there. The Ukrainian people did not want a dictator. The Ukrainian people do not want to be invaded by Russia. The Ukrainian people have a very different take on these events than you do. As the ones actually being invaded, I think their perspective is very worthwhile to listen to. And what you are doing is taking every petty justification from the Kim Jong-un of Russia, and you're repeating it uncritically as though it actually is all our fault. Did we fuck up? Yes. Did we handle the dissolution of the Soviet Union terribly? Yes. Are we at fault for a lot of things? Yes. But for God's sake, there are things we're not at fault for. And I think it's really disgusting and anti-American to legitimately lay this at our feet, especially when it comes at the expense of a Ukrainian self-defense.
it's not anti-American to want to see American troops not go die, dude.
They're
It's
not
not
going over there,
anti-American.
man. They're not over there. But
Yeah,
you want
well,
us to
actually,
see, you
that's
want
not
us to
true. There
see
are, but
political and economic influence everywhere. You said you don't want us to
yes,
have alliances.
yes,
You don't want us to have trade alliances. You don't want
no,
anything.
no, I did not say trade alliances. You framed that as intervention. I don't believe that to be the case.
We're trading arms with Ukraine. You have issue with that.
That's not trading arms, dude. Stop being so. That's such bullshit.
Yes,
Come on.
it is. No, that's literally what we're doing. We're giving them.
We lend them the money to buy our arms, Vosh, and then we forgive that debt later on. You know exactly the game.
Yeah, that is an economic exchange. That is trade by definition.
That's communism, dude.
That's true. But it's communism to forgive loans? No, that's what Jesus asked for, actually. Jesus Christ was the one who said you should forgive your debts every 7 years.
Yeah, I don't think he meant a nuclear arsenal
Well, you'd have to
or biolabs as part of that.
Ukraine is a nuclear arsenal?
You know what I'm saying? That's just a joke.
Oh, well, I mean, we'd have to find Jesus and ask him. Yeah, it's an economic trade. We're trading arms.
HIMAR missiles. You gotta give your allies HIMAR missiles and then forgive the debt. That's what Jesus said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if the alternative is being invaded and conquered by fascists, then yeah, sure, why not? Yeah, I do believe in.
Well, why not? Because it's not libertarian, brother. It's not libertarian.
Because you're not libertarian. You don't believe in self-defense.
No, I believe they have the full right to self-defense. I don't believe that the American empire has any role in that process.
Wait, we don't have the right to freely associate with Ukraine to provide them arms and help them self-defend?
We don't have the right to freely associate. Do
Yeah,
I
we're freely
have the right?
associating.
Do I have the right to opt out of this process?
That's not how nation states work, but if we lived in a full like libertarian society, then I guess sure. I mean, there wouldn't really be taxes or a nation state in a full libertarian society,
Right.
right?
But
Yeah.
we don't. So my opinion matters. And my opinion is that we
So
shouldn't be doing this.
so you don't believe in nation states forming treaties or trading or
I think if it's a peace treaty or a trading, yeah, that's fine.
okay. Well, wait, hold on. A peace treaty is a kind of interventionism because peace implies the absence of war. And the absence of war, I mean, that is a statement to the effect of we will not invade you, right? I don't know if peace treaties should be allowed under your definition.
Well, okay. I think
Well,
I think I'm good with it.
I don't know what you think countries can and can't do because it seems like you're okay with Russia doing everything and dog, but then with America we actually have to lose all of our allies and lose all of our
That's
power.
just a bullshit framing, dude. I've never once said that what Putin did was okay. I've explained the rationale. I've explained the U.S. lead up to it. I've explained the U.S. participation in fomenting it. That is all pertinent information for the evaluation of the overall circumstances of this conflict. You want to diminish all of it because you're trying to ally yourself with the Project for a New American Century neocon worldview that the U.S. government has the right to dictate everyone's policy all over the
We're
planet.
not.
I disagree.
Ukraine's policy was already one of self-defense. You keep lying to justify your point. We are freely
I'm not
associated.
lying.
We are freely
We replaced
associating with
their
Ukraine.
leadership. You have
You're running
Victoria
back to
Nuland and
that.
Jeffrey
Not
Pyatt.
true. Not true.
We have Victoria Nuland and Jeffrey Pyatt on the phone. What's that?
You're repeating all the Kremlin. I've literally heard everything you're saying.
Have you
from
heard
Russian
the tape?
state. Yeah, I have because I heard it from Russian Telegram channels. It's all bullshit, but easily debunkable propaganda. But it's
That's not
crazy
debunkable at all.
It's
they
crazy.
haven't even attempted to debunk it.
It's crazy that you, a so-called America First individual, it's like 1-to-1. Like, yeah, da Doyovich. Like, yeah, I'm getting my marching orders over from the Kremlin here.
Vosh, you haven't countered any of what I've said. You just labeled it as Russian propaganda. That's not an argument.
You say that like you oppose what Putin's doing, but what will you actually do to oppose it? Nothing.
I will
In fact,
applaud them
America
from
should
afar,
shoot
Vosh.
itself in the dick.
I will applaud them from
Guys,
afar.
remember to try to avoid.
Wow, that's very helpful.
Remember to try to avoid logical fallacies and insulting each other personally. All right. I know it's getting heated.
Gotcha. Back to my logical argument. You want America to shoot itself in the dick. You're like, oh, I think what Putin's doing is bad. By the way, let him do it, and also America abandon all your allies and also lose all foreign influence.
What you're advocating for is actually increasing the chances of us all shooting ourselves in the dick. I'm trying to push back against your worldview. I think it's extraordinarily dangerous.
I want alliances. I want countries to get along. And in order for countries to get along, they have to have each other's backs. Otherwise, an alliance doesn't mean anything. But
all right, so it's a fairly similar circumstance with Taiwan. So I assume you're prepared for a dual front world war if they were to invade Taiwan.
I don't think China will, but if they do, yes.
That's lunacy.
Yeah, I agree. I think that all countries but America should be able to conquer the world, and we should just sit on our thumbs and jerk off the whole time. I think that's an excellent America First position.
Yeah, your position is that to prevent any other empire, we must maintain our empire indefinitely.
Well, that's
correct?
The nice thing about our empire. Our empire with Taiwan is us just being on good terms with them, and China would be invading them.
I'm glad you admitted that. You view our empire as benevolent. You ask the people in the Middle East, I think they would disagree.
I'm sorry. Do you think there is a meaningful difference between being allied with a country and invading them? Do you think there's a difference between those two things?
Sure.
Okay, so when we're quote unquote being an empire with Taiwan, what we mean by that is that they're a fully autonomous country over which we have no direct political control, but we're an ally to them. And when China means,
see, this is the difference, though.
When China wants to get involved, they invade and conquer. Do you think there's a difference between those two situations?
Of course, but that's also not acknowledging the invasion and conquering that the U.S. does, or the fact that the 2014 revolution put in a puppet for the West.
You are
so
desperate to blame America. America last. Every
You're
time.
so desperate to dismiss all of this, even though it's true.
Listen, American man, bow down and prostrate before your Kremlin superiors, for you are responsible for all evil in the world. American man,
This framing
you may
may work
not
with
have
your
an opinion on anything
this
abroad.
framing may work with your incel audience online, but it ain't gonna work here, dude.
Incels love my America First rhetoric. It is true. Look,
I would imagine it's the only thing that makes them feel like their dicks are working.
it's like, but I mean, we'll know our dicks are working when we're sitting on our thumbs jerking them in your ideology. Like, no foreign influence whatsoever. You want us to cede everything.
Yes.
Yes.
I want to end the
Including
American empire, as most
mutually-
libertarians that aren't rocking with the Project for New American Century believe, Vosh.
Mutually beneficial alliances, free association between nation states. Taiwan wants to be friends with us, and we want to be friends with Taiwan. But then you come in. No, you say.
I come in and I come in and I say
wrong or something.
I come in and I say that a hot war with 1.4 billion people and 300 nuclear weapons is not a good idea. That's where I come in.
So what happens when they want to take Poland? What happens when Russia wants to take Poland? Do we do anything?
I say that the EU better get its shit together and defend itself, but the US is out.
Why would the EU do it?
Because it's NATO. It's, you know what I'm saying, man. Come on.
Whoa. Hold on. Wait, you want other European countries to get involved in a Polish conflict? What you want?
I'm saying that's to their actual benefit and their mutual defense treaty, right? Explain to me how the American how is the American wait. How is the American homeland?
You're okay.
How is the American homeland jeopardized? How is the American homeland jeopardized by this?
You're okay with mutual defense treaties with literally everyone as long as America's not involved. America last. You think the EU defense treaties are okay?
I care about the American empire ending. That's what I care about.
What about the European empire?
Is it expanding, Vosh?
The EU, yes, constantly.
Constantly?
Yes, the EU constantly evaluates both new members and adds them, and they have different economic zones they add people to, which is absolutely economic.
It seems to me that the EU is a trading pact more than a military alliance.
Nope, well, first of all, there is. You said mutual defense alliance for one, and there is to an extent, depending on like the.
Well, I was referencing NATO, but yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so wait. So should Poland just be on its own?
No, if those other nations want to be still in NATO and defend each other, I think that alliance makes a hell of a lot more sense, because if you're of the belief, which I'm not, but you honestly, I think you're lying. You've even said that this is an act of desperation. You don't think that Russia can even prevail in Ukraine, but now there's this danger of them taking over Poland and then rolling over Europe. I think it's all nonsense. But if you want to play in that framework, well, then it makes sense for the European members of NATO to work to defend one another. It doesn't make sense for the United States, which sits 5,000, 6,000 miles away, to be a participant in any of this.
You don't think that America has an interest in the regional stability of Europe? Does your understanding of economics only like extend to arm's reach? You realize we have a global economy, right? Taiwan manufactures most of the world's super chip, the conductors and microchips and shit. Yeah. So we have an interest in the whole world. Everyone has an interest in the whole world.
All right, so you believe in the American empire as the global hegemon. That's fine.
No,
I don't.
No, you misunderstood. Every country has an interest in the goings-on of the entire world. Every country.
Yes, it would have an impact on our economy, undoubtedly. Doesn't change the fact that it's immoral for us to be dictating policy all over the planet.
No, you keep running back to the same talking points. We were asked to provide arms for Ukraine, and we are. That's it. That's not us dictating policy.
Oh, that's it. That's it. It's just as simple as that.
Yes, that is not us dictating policy. That is
if you dismiss the entire first hour of our discussion, then that's it. We just gave them weapons.
Policy, if anything. And also, by the way, we do have a decades-old mutual defense pact with Taiwan. So that would also, again, not be us dictating policy. That's just us fulfilling a half-century-old promise. Yeah,
just a half-century-old promise that leads to World War III.
Okay.
Sounds great.
So you do genuinely just believe China and Russia should get to eat the world?
No, I genuinely believe that the worst possible outcome for any of this would be World War III, and I want to avoid it at all costs.
Me too. I think that I'm doing that. So tell me, if Russia took Ukraine and then wanted to take Poland as well, do you think that
Poland can't defend itself?
It doesn't matter whether or not I think.
No, I've already said that I want the U.S. to exit NATO. So,
yeah, wait, that's not relevant to what I'm saying. So, do you think?
Yes, it is relevant.
Do you think Poland should defend itself?
Sure,
Why?
because they have a right to defend themselves.
At the expense of World War III?
I don't know what you mean by that.
If Russia invades Poland and Poland fights back, don't you think there's a likelihood that Poland might resort to using tactical nuclear weapons as a way of settling the conflict quickly?
Yeah, but they still have a right to defend themselves.
What? And start World War III? Are you insane?
Well, I can't dictate that they don't defend themselves, Vosh. This is different. I'm
we're
just
not
trying to say that the U.S. shouldn't be involved in this because they have fomented much of it.
No, okay, whoa, hold on. And if Poland defended itself, then it would be responsible for engaging in aggression against Russia.
That's not at all my framing of any of this. I've never once said that Ukraine was aggressing upon Russia. I mean, I could argue that with the Donbass region in terms of bombing Russian speakers, but I haven't gone there.
I know, that'd be a terrible place to go. So wait, why isn't Ukraine aggressing? Wait, why wouldn't Poland be aggressing on Russia in this hypothetical?
Well, if they're being invaded, it's not aggression, it's defense.
Okay, well, you can be aggressive in defense. It's totally possible, right? Like striking within enemy positions. But with regards to Poland, isn't it irresponsible for them to defend themselves?
Is it irresponsible for them to? No, I don't believe it is. I don't believe that it's irresponsible for Ukraine to defend itself if it wants to.
Why not?
However, I do think it's irresponsible that they didn't go to the negotiating table and accept that peace offer in the first month of the invasion. I think that was irresponsible, and I don't think that would have happened if not for the West and the State Department's advisory.
So let's say Russia does a blitz on Poland and takes a decent amount of territory right from the get-go. And then they propose a peace deal where they get to keep most of Poland's territory, but Poland continues to fight back. Do you think that'd be irresponsible of them to do so?
Honestly, I lost the hypothetical at some point in there.
If Russia blitzed Polish territory and took a lot of it, and then
so you're saying they've already taken all of Ukraine
in this hypothetical?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead.
And now they want to take Poland. And they've blitzed Poland's territory. They've taken a lot of it in the opening few days of the war. And then when Poland starts to really mount a defense, Russia says, okay, here's a peace deal. Do you think it'd be irresponsible of Poland not to accept it?
Potentially. It depends on the circumstances. I'd have to evaluate in the real time.
What if the peace deal involved Russia holding and keeping all of the territory that it gained in the first few days of the war?
Well, that's not exactly the case in the situation in Ukraine, so I don't know if this analogy actually applies.
No, I know, but like if it was that case, do you think it'd be irresponsible of Poland not to accept it?
It depends. If they think that they can prevail in a hot war with Russia, then maybe they should continue to fight. I don't know.
Wait, you think they should fight in a hot war with a nuclear power?
That's their prerogative. It's their nation, not mine.
Wait, hold on. You think that they have a right to initiate World War III potentially?
I think they have a right to defend themselves. I do, yes.
And start World War III.
Well, if you think that leads to World War III, they still have a right to defend themselves, yes.
Okay, so what we're running into here is a completely incoherent ideology. I don't know if this is like an America Last thing or what specifically leads to it. The problem here is that
that's just a fair encapsulation. That's an unfair encapsulation of my belief. I'm saying I want the United States to not be dictating these policies.
I know.
If they want to negotiate peace, they should negotiate peace based off of their circumstances.
Right, America Last. If your real goal is to avoid World War III, based on your logic, no nation should ever engage in conflict with Russia or China or any other aggressive nuclear power.
That's not the case. I believe that the potential for World War III increases when you're talking about the two, or really the three largest nuclear powers on Earth that are now antagonizing each other and using much of this as proxy fodder. And it's tragic. It's resulting in the death of hundreds of thousands of people, many of them innocent. I just think that the U.S. empire does not have the ability or the moral authority to be involved in this in any way, and it has ultimately worsened the situation.
You said avoid World War III at all costs. So
I would like to avoid that at all costs. Yes, Vosh, I would.
Okay, so let's say Putin says he wants the Baltics. He wants former Yugoslavia. He wants half of Germany back. And they all have
a right to defend themselves, Vosh.
And potentially cause World War III.
They all have a right to defend themselves, Vosh.
Okay,
yes.
So you don't actually think that people should defend or avoid World War III at any cost. Do you think the right to self-defense supersedes the threat of ending the world?
Well, the right to self-defense is always paramount. You always have that right. I just think that the cost-benefit analysis changes when you're dealing with nuclear arsenals pointing at each other.
There are countries in Europe that have nukes. I mean,
of course.
Right, and if Putin reaches that point, he will eventually be engaged in combat with nuclear-capable nations.
Correct. And I hope
Okay.
that doesn't happen. So
Well, if
what's
it
your
does
point?
happen, should those countries immediately surrender to avoid engagement with Russia?
No, we're just saying the same thing over and over again. I don't know what are you trying to get at? I'm
I
saying
want to
these
know
nations
whether
have
or not
these.
avoid World War III at all costs is really your belief or if you have another belief.
I honestly I don't know what you're hinting at. So if you could just make it explicit, I'd appreciate it.
I'm explicitly asking this question over and over again. Should
And I'm
every
answering it,
country,
and I'm answering it consistently over and over again. I'm saying
every
the U.S. shouldn't be involved. If these nations want to
okay,
defend themselves, that's their prerogative. If
I
that
know
leads to World
America.
War III and nuclear war, that's tragic. How many times do I have to say
Okay,
it?
so your position here is genuinely America last because you believe in self-defense as an overriding principle above avoiding World War III for every other country except for us.
I believe that the United States is not Poland. I believe it is not Ukraine.
Well, I'm going to need to see a
I believe
study
it
on
is
that
not the
one.
Baltic states. I believe it is not the EU. I believe it is not Europe. I believe it's not Africa. I believe it's not the Middle East. I believe it's not uh, the the waters right off of China either. I believe that we should withdraw from global hegemon status.
We're not talking about I'm not. You keep running back to that. I don't know why it's like the dialogue tree. You keep running back to it. I'm
I'm running
talking
back
about
to it because that's the reality of
self-defense.
the situation.
I'm talking about self-defense relative to the threat for World War III. Now, if I understand your values correctly, you are okay with World War III happening and all life on Earth ending as long as it's brought about by a product of legitimate self-defense. Do I have that right?
No, you don't have that right. I'm not ever going to be okay or happy about World War III. I'm just saying that I believe that the U.S.'s involvement in all of this is increasing the likelihood of that actually coming
I
to
know you
pass.
hate America, but I'm not talking about America. I'm talking about general principles with regards to national self-defense and World War III. So you are okay with
Okay. Let's
nations
let's flip this on you, Bosch.
defending themselves. Wait,
Let's
but you
flip this
can't.
on.
Wait,
Let's flip this on you because no,
so
I've already
you
answered.
are
I've answered you
okay.
20 times on the
But you
same
keep
topic.
not. I don't think you understand the point. It seems like for you, self-defense is a higher priority to avoiding World War III. So my argument then would be that nations that are allied with each other have mutual self-defense, and that the existence of mutual assured self-defense is the greatest preventer of war in human history. So my argument is that what I'm proposing avoids World War III and promotes self-defense. But you hate
Can you also
America.
can you also no, I don't hate America. Can you also acknowledge that those alliances, if they behave in a antagonistic fashion, can ultimately be to the detriment and increase the chances of hot conflict?
Sure. I mean, potentially, but that doesn't seem to be empirically demonstrable.
Really?
Yeah, it seems like the formation of alliances decreases the total amount of conflict.
Well, yes, I'd say on net, yes, but there are examples where that's not the case, correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, sure, of course. But I don't
Okay.
think that there would be less conflict around the world if all of these alliances just broke down. You spoke positively of BRICS. Okay, I mean, I don't think they're doing much at the moment, but theoretically, I support a challenge to U.S. Like the international dollar. I think that's fine. With regards to Russia,
For the record, I didn't speak positively of BRICS. I just brought it up.
I think you overstated their potential influence in the global affairs.
Well, they now have over 35% of global trade is under the BRICS umbrella, so it's not nothing.
Yeah, but that's not BRICS trade. Like they've all agreed to it, but they're still bound by the U.S. dollar and our economic hegemon, right? Like South Africa,
Well, until their
Brazil.
debt rolls off, yeah, but that's still like this is all part of a process that will take probably a decade or two to unwind. But it didn't have to be that way. If not for this antagonistic approach with Russia, which drove them into the arms of the Chinese and ultimately scared the shit out of anybody else that was trying to dictate any sort of policy with their neighbors, and realizing that the U.S. would never allow any of that.
Like
That they're now banding together to undermine the U.S. dollar's reserve currency status, which will ultimately be to the detriment of the American people. And I think that's, well, it's probably inevitability. It's still unfortunate.
okay, so I mean, the main economic driver in BRICS is China, and they're still one of our major trading partners, and they always are going to be, at least until things meaningfully change.
Well, yeah, I
They
mean,
literally.
always until they invade Taiwan and you support World War III with them. So I don't know.
Well, hold on. We've established you're actually the one who's okay with World War III. I'm trying to prevent it.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
want you
We've
want the
established that
world.
I'm the one
You
that's okay with World War III.
Yeah,
That's
well,
a real interesting framing.
your ideology is all alliances should be broken and the world should be left to the handling of half-mad
I
dictators
believe
who
that the
invade
entangling
countries for fun.
alliances. I believe that the entangling alliances for the U.S. are used as justification ultimately to fund the military-industrial complex and increase their control over global dynamics. Really, not just trade, but control broadly, including pipelines. And I ultimately I think that the empire is falling, and this is the lashing out phase where we
We
risk
This is what I
World War
mean. This
III.
this is so strange to me because I feel like I'm reading. This reads to me like the way a lefty pamphlet might talk about how the U.S. empire is
Yeah,
falling.
because I'm actually
American
anti-war, Bosch. It's different.
American global
You've
hegemony
never
is
heard it.
stronger now than it literally ever has been in all of human history. The hegemony of the US dollar and of our trade and of our influence, and this is empirically demonstrable, never been this strong before. So
Yeah,
I don't know
you
where all
just have to
this.
totally ignore the 33 trillion in debt that we have, and I guess you're right.
What does our national debt have to do with the U.S. international dollar being the center point for global trade? What does that have to do with anything? That's a
Bosch,
different thing.
do you really not understand?
Wait,
Are
I'm
you
sorry. Wait, hold
are
on.
you are you
Hold on.
pretending to be
Wait,
ignorant?
hold on. Explain to me directly the relationship between U.S. national debt and the U.S. global dollar.
I'll explain it to you quite simply. The inflationary pressures will ultimately make people migrate away from the U.S. dollar, and the only way that the U.S. government can maintain their debt is to print.
But it hasn't, and we've been printing for
That's not
decades, and we're
true.
more powerful than ever.
That's not true. We've experienced the worst inflation in your lifetime.
Yeah, and then it lasted a year, and then Biden passed a bill, and it went back down, and now it's at 3%. And also, that's not the same as the national debt. That's a totally different number. That's like completely. You realize that like
You know that they have to
wait,
maintain that debt, right, Bosch?
national inflation, national debt, and international hegemonic currency status are three somewhat related but largely disconnected factors when it comes to a country's power, right?
They're extraordinarily related. If you want to diminish that, it's just your ignorance, not mine.
It's a fact that we are more powerful economically on an international scale than we ever have been. Maybe that'll change in the future. I mean, I don't know. I can't see the future, but it's just weird to hear this like, American empire fallen, glorious Chinese dollar. Now, and it's like, what the fuck am I listening to? Like, this doesn't sound like reality. It certainly doesn't sound like America first. I want to operate in reality where we acknowledge the fact that the empire is not falling.
I think actually you're the one that's detached from reality. You're not able to see the tides changing, and that's fine, but it doesn't change the fact that I'm right and you're wrong.
I don't get all my news exclusively from Russian Telegram channels, so it's possible that I'm not.
I've
I'm
never
not
even
like
been on
getting all the.
Telegram, but okay.
What source do you get your Kremlin talking points from?
They send it to me with the rubles when they send me the checks.
Oh, rubles. Oh man, I never mind about the whole U.S. international currency thing. That's rough. Look, I'm pulling your chain just a little bit on that one specifically, but I really do think that the problem is that ultimately your ideology doesn't really have an answer for imperialism. You want America to be weak, but you don't do anything or have any answer to
No, I
other
want America
countries.
to be strong, but I want it to be strong in national self-defense, not in global empire.
Okay, then who gets to have the empire?
The nations have a right to defend themselves, Bosch. I've been very clear on that.
Okay,
Your vantage point that Russia is going to roll across Europe, I think, is delusional. I think it's nonsense, and I think you know that, which makes this even more bizarre.
that's what people said about Ukraine until he invaded. Now hold on, wait. I really want to know though. What answer do you have to like international empire? So like what happens if every country withdraws and they do their own like isolationist thing, and then inevitably, because of course this is going to happen, countries like Russia and China start invading neighbors and growing stronger?
What is my answer to that? Those nations better defend themselves.
Okay, so no nation next to China can defend itself against China except for India and possibly Russia. So your answer then is just good luck, have fun?
Yeah, and your answer is that the
Okay,
most
no,
lethal empire of the past 50 years, you're going to just continue to support it because you
I
think it's the
really want to
benevolent
explore this. Let me
controller.
tell you what your ideology will lead to. If you got everything you wanted, all it would mean is that the biggest, baddest dictators in the world would start gobbling up their neighborhoods, and nobody would ever be able to resist them because they would hyper militarily industrialize, same as Germany did. No individual country would be able to stand up against them, and the world would be gobbled up under one or two empires, including eventually us.
Vosh, you've done an incredible job convincing me that you're a neoconservative. I wish you would drop the libertarian label.
Explicitly answer why that wouldn't happen without getting snarky about it.
I don't have the right to be snarky after you've said I'm un-American and America last repeatedly. I don't have the right to be snarky in response.
That's an extremely accurate assessment of your position. It sounds to me like you want everyone to withdraw so the biggest, baddest dictators can gobble up all their neighbors. Explain how your ideology would prevent that.
I can't explain how it'll prevent it because it's going to be up to them to defend themselves. I can't see the future. Okay. I don't know what they'll do.
Okay, wait. So your answer is, Lamau, you better win. That's how you would do it. You realize that would just mean the whole world would be constant, nonstop conflict as nations constantly vie to invade each other or preemptively defend themselves by invading their neighbor. And it's might makes right everywhere all the time. And there would no longer be any international cooperation. And inevitably, some country with the nukes would end the world. This is the thing that gets me. You're so smug about how wrong you are, but your ideology speed runs global Armageddon. Like, you treat it like a joke. Like, oh yeah, let's just get rid of all alliances. And then, well, if you get invaded by another country, good luck, have fun. Like, bro, you are literally you're like a death cultist. You're like worshiping the end.
No, you're worshiping the U.S. empire. You're worshiping the U.S. empire. That's what you're doing.
Desperate. All you have is America bad, America bad, America bad. That's all you have. Your ideology is literally, let's speed run World War III. And all you can do to say in response to that is, well, at least when the world ends, America won't be in it, right? Christ.
So you acknowledge that you're in support of American empire, correct?
I'm in support of international alliance, the thing that prevents the end of the world.
And part of that has been the American empire for your entire life, which has cost millions of innocent lives. I mean, you good with it?
I mean,
you think that's been to our benefit? Is that America first?
Wait, first of all, so again, it's crazy. The only thing you have to say is, well, you know that America bad, right? It's insane.
Bosh, your entire argument boils down to the American empire must reign supreme, so that the Chinese and the Russia don't rule across their neighbors. You support the neoconservative worldview. That's a fact.
You have nothing to say for your dogshit ideology other than, well, wanting international alliances makes you a neocon. You're John McCain. Your ideology would bring about more death than any ideology in human history. The Holocaust, nothing compared to it. Yes, you literally said.
A non-interventionist perspective will lead to the Holocaust times 10, really.
Your answer not times 10, buddy, times 1,000, everyone would die. Your answer to what do we do internationally about
this just goes to show how much you believe in the U.S. empire.
Your answer. That's literally, it's like a buzzword. You're like a broken NPC. I'm talking to somebody who was built by Bethesda right now. American Empire, American Empire.
Are you denying that it's real? Are you denying that it's real?
I am talking to you right now.
Are you denying that the U.S. empire exists?
He can't walk away from it. He can't. He's like, I need to talk about this specific subject. That's all I have. I need everyone
because
to know
it's the one thing you can't deal with.
Please. The people listening don't know enough that I hate America. I need to talk more about how everything is good as long as America suffers. Nuclear war, good as long as America suffers. International conflict, good as long as America suffers. Whoa, you want to prevent nuclear war? Well, buddy? You want to keep nukes from falling on America? You neocon? Well, yeah, you know what? I do want nukes to not fall on America. I do. It's true. You've got me. I want nukes to fall on nobody, which is why I support a system of international alliances and through collaboration.
As long as you say it calmly, then it doesn't sound like John McCain, huh?
Yes, it is true. I want international alliances is a John McCain ideology. It's something only he believes. Only he could have conceived of something that evil.
It's Dick Cheney. It's Victoria Nuland. It's your whole cartel, dude.
It's the entire.
I just wish you would drop the libertarian label. You're an interventionist. You believe in empire. That's okay.
You have no ideology outside of disliking America.
I'm a non-interventionist, Bosh. I'm an actual libertarian. I have plenty of ideology. Yours is inconsistent. You believe in the American empire while pretending to be non-interventionist, which isn't true. You are the biggest interventionist I've ever spoken to.
By wanting there to be international alliances. Yes, that's true. Can I get a repeater one more time in what you said earlier? Can I hear it? Your solution to everyone withdrawing and forming no international
Is
alliances, and
that
everyone
they?
only
No,
defending
I
the
didn't say. I didn't say. I've never said that I'm going to dictate what all of these nations are going to
Oh, wait,
do.
hold on. I didn't ask you. Wait, I did. Hold on. Wait. I'm giving you. You'll say something stupid in a minute, but you need to give me a minute, okay? So, under your ideology, every nation would be non-interventionist in the sense that you have described, right? Where they don't form international alliances, they don't dictate policy, they don't come to each other's defense, that sort of thing, right?
I'm just going to have you guys do your closing thoughts because we're coming up on 90 minutes, and then just take a couple questions from the audience if you're okay with that.
Yeah, sure.
All right, wonderful. All right, Vosh, closing thoughts?
Yeah, look, international affairs are messy business, but I think it's pretty clear with any understanding of the historical record that completely withdrawing from international agreement and leaving everyone to themselves is basically just, letting all of the big, mean countries gobble up all the small ones. It guarantees constant war. We did this for most of human history, and most of human history was constant war. If you were a man growing up at certain points in history, quite a few of them in England or France or what would later become Germany, then war was just like, oh, that's the war I served in, then that's the war I served in, and that's the war my pop served in, and such and such. So that wouldn't be to your benefit at all. But secondly, I do not want America to lock itself down completely isolate itself, and then 20 years down the line we all die in nuclear holocaust. We need to try, I think, a little bit better than that. We need to believe in peace.
Thank you, Vosh. Clint, go ahead.
I agree. We do need to believe in peace. I don't believe that the U.S. empire has fomented peace throughout my lifetime. I think there's plenty of evidence to demonstrate that I am, in fact, correct in that statement. It was Secretary Perry who, under the Bill Clinton administration, almost resigned over NATO expansion. He said that bringing Russia into the fold first was much more important to him. And in his memoir, he said, I did not believe the timing was right to push for NATO enlargement. Most important, we needed to keep moving forward with Russia. And I feared that NATO enlargement at this time, excuse me, would shove us into reverse. I believe that a regression here could squander the positive relations we had so painstakingly and patiently developed in the opportunistic post-Cold War period. I knew that NATO membership would and should eventually come to the Eastern European nations, but I believed that we needed more time to bring Russia in first. He has lamented that as the gravest failure of his career in politics. And there are a litany of other quotes from American, politicians and State Department representatives from the 1990s that all acknowledge that what I'm saying is correct, that ultimately it was the expansion of 20 nations into NATO after repeated promises that we would not be doing so that has catalyzed this conflict with Russia. We knew damn well that this was going to come about, and this was all part of the Project for New American Century, which unfortunately, Victoria Nuland is married to the creator of that, and she has been the focal point in Ukraine, negotiating, quote unquote, but really fomenting much of this conflict. So for that reason, primarily, I want the U.S. not to be involved with this. I believe that they are an impediment to peace, not a mechanism for peace. And I obviously do believe that the Ukrainian people, as well as the Polish or anybody in Europe, has a right to defend themselves against invasion. I think that the U.S. government should not be involved, and I believe that is firmly the American first position, contrary to what Vosh said repeatedly. Thank you for having me, Josie.
Absolutely. I added two speakers to ask questions because I know Vosh will have to get out of here pretty soon. So Jethro, why don't you go ahead?
Hi, Vosh. Economics have come up several times in this debate, and you've repeatedly tried to frame Clint as being America last, so it's worth clarifying the reality of our macroeconomic situation. To quote Ron Paul, the greatest libertarian himself, it is no coincidence that the century of total war coincided with the century of central banking. Are you aware that the United States government has already bankrupted itself, perpetuating the past 50 years of global petrodollar empire hegemony? With over $30 trillion in debt, soon to be $33 trillion. Are you aware that the US government's total unfunded liabilities add up to over $100 trillion? Bankrupt. Are you aware that when the US government sends aid...
Is this an actual question, or are you framing your manifesto with a question mark at the end?
It's a question about your economics understanding in America first. How
My economic understanding in America First is that the American proletariat shall rise and the working class will shed the chains of the bourgeoisie.
So you're openly
Next
communist.
question.
Okay. Central banking
yes.
is the fifth plank of the Communist Manifesto. So thank you for
Yeah, that's
clarifying
true.
that you are not actually America First.
I'm America Communist First. It's called MAGA communism.
Okay. You're not a serious person.
Oh, no, wait. Oh, I thought you...
You're not a serious person. And
Hey, man, I'm not the one quoting Ron Paul for my opinions. Yeah, anyway, in reality, like, obviously these questions require extremely complicated, nuanced answers, but you just wanted to, like, say stuff, so I can't really respond. You like an hour to respond to all the false premises you laid out? My answer is glory to the working class.
Is $30 trillion in debt a false premise? Is printing money to perpetuate the slaughter a false premise? We're bankrupting our country.
Okay, please.
All right, thank you, Jethro.
I love you, whatever their name was. I love you.
Jethro.
Jethro, yes.
Daniel, why don't you go ahead?
All right, thank you. Clint, I wanted to commend you for your candor and your composure throughout this, what wanted to be a debate. And then, Vouch, I just wanted to say, sorry I don't have a question, but I wanted to say if kicking and screaming and calling names was how a debate is won, you got this one, buddy. You got it.
Thank you.
You won. You're welcome. You won.
Thank you, Daniel. Anarchist Frodo, go ahead.
Hi, Bosch. Earlier you said that it was Russian state propaganda that the U.S. State Department or anybody would believe that they think Ukraine is some sort of red line, but the director of the CIA himself said that both he and Russia believe that that's a red line in the sand. So what do you say to that?
Yeah, the Russian propaganda is the framing that Russia legitimately believed that NATO expansion or the non-dissolution from NATO of Ukraine, that those things posed a geopolitical threat to Russia.
These are leaked cables from our State Department through WikiLeaks. You know that, right?
You didn't hear what I just said, but I'll repeat it. There is a difference between Russia saying it's a red line and Russia saying that it poses a real threat. The idea that Ukraine being a part of NATO is a real threat to Russia is factually incorrect. It is a ludicrous proposition. The idea that Russian politicians legitimately fear that, it's not true. The idea that Russia has said that it's a red line, that's absolutely true. But there's a pretty big and important difference between what's reality and what dictators say is reality. I mean, if we cede the framing to them, then you could rightly say, like, well, Hitler said that a total secession of the Versailles Treaty was, like, not doing so was the red line. They may say that, but you can't give them the framing that that's, like, actually the reason why they do it. Usually they do it for other reasons and they come up with a justification. In this case, Russia centered on this because they knew for a fact that NATO would never disallow a country from being considered for NATO, because to do so would give Russia, a geopolitical enemy, the power to determine who our allies are. And that's incredibly cucky. It's very cucked.
Thank you, Anarchist Frodo. Top Lobster, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, can hear you good.
Abundantly.
Okay, yeah, how you doing, Bosch? I wasn't familiar with you before this debate, and I'm gotta say that I'm very impressed. So what I do is I'm actually the host of it's like the largest homosexual podcast probably online. We really we do our best to go out of our way to find the dumbest, gayest people online. It's called Tower Gang, and we usually go Wednesdays 9/11. We'll go for like an hour and a half, but like you would be the perfect guest. I mean, like our prerequisites, you met them and you've exceeded them. So reach out to me if you're interested, and thank you for the entertainment. This was a great debate. Thank you guys. Thank you, Josie.
You can't have the Top Dumb Gay podcast because I run the Top Dumb Gay podcast. Whose market do you think you're trying to poll?
Wow.
This is a free market, Bosch. Come on.
I think it speaks to some of them. Apart from the immaturity, I think it speaks to sort of like the whining or the manifesto writing. I want everyone to remember, of course, anyone who is listening, that my position here at the end of the day is one which I believe averts war and cements a strong economy and a civil democracy for everyone involved. I think that the ideology that I've had to argue here is pretty ludicrous, but I fully think that it's everyone's material interest to go along with it.
Appreciate that. Thanks, Vosh. And I just want to say that I host the gayest spaces on all of spaces. It is gayer than AIDS here, so I appreciate you all sticking with me.
That's why I'm here.
Let me see. Mark Random, go ahead.
Oh my God.
Okay, this is the serious version of me. What I noticed throughout the debate is it was almost 45 to 50 minutes of debate, and then both people just repeating what their talking points were. And I feel like the problem with debates is no one actually tries to find a solution. They just want to convince that they're right. So where I found a little dishonesty between both is where I don't think Clint was 100% acknowledging that Putin probably would have done the things regardless, but I don't think Bosch was ever going to admit the American antagonistic for the past 20 years that brought this upon. The problem is you can't call one thing fact and another thing propaganda because there's thousands of different types of facts. And unfortunately, you keep bringing up the past, but we don't know what would have happened. We can only deal with the here and now. And I honestly don't know. I went back and forth believing both would either be a solution to peace, but that's all I wanted to say is it just turns into a cycle and you never know what is going to be. You never know. But I just personally think war upon war doesn't work. And that's not me being America last. It's just that possibly going in a different direction would cause less war than what the U.S. has already done. But yes, obviously, if the U.S. had to go to war with Russia, it would be pro-America against Russia. But we're not at that point yet. And I think the only reason we should be is if it gets to that point. Sorry. Love you all.
Yeah, my wife, I went out halfway through what you were saying, so I apologize if anything was addressed to me. But no, I would not personally support the American government in a war against Russia. I would advocate for peace as soon as possible.
All right. Love you guys. Bye.
Thanks, Mark. I'll take one more question for Vosh and then we can let you go, Vosh. Night Shift, go ahead.
Yeah, hi there. Nice to see you all here. Vosh, I was just actually, the problem is Mark kind of stole what I was going to say for the most part. But I would like to hear your justification for, what was it, social democracy? Like, how do you justify that? How do you justify, like, that kind of mob rule as a government? And why would you think that would be the best form of government that there is?
Do you mean just democracy broadly?
Well, what is, okay, so what is your general belief of democracy? Like, what is your general philosophy on it?
I mean, I think that generally speaking, you should try to represent the people's interests. You should try to give them as much power as possible over decisions which it could be to their benefit to have power over. But you also need people to be well informed. If they're not well informed, their democratic decision making doesn't really mean that much. So it's a complicated process. But like ideally, you want people to do stuff that works in their interest. You would need built-in minority protections, of course. You don't want like a 90% majority to be able to just go over a 10% minority. I mean, the superseding, the overlapping systems that you would need to get like a really, really good democracy, I think, are pretty complicated. But at the end of the day, I just want people to be free. It's all about freedom.
Okay, and on that front, do you believe that a democracy would be better than an individualist anarchist system where people are individually free to make their own choices, unhindered by any kind of mob rule, unhindered by any kind of representation, or not? Like, what would you think?
Well, I think the latter ultimately would be a very unfree society, because without any laws or social norms to bind people's behavior, people would take the freedom from others. It's all well and good to say, let's make society as like anarchistic and free as possible. But if you don't design it properly or build the proper incentives, then all you get is like warlords. I mean, you effectively go to like pre-civilization days. So my goal, I guess, or my idea would just be see what kinds of freedom people can get and what they can be allowed to have, and draw the line where they take other freedoms away. And hopefully you can sort of build out well from that.
Yeah, okay, I'm just going to leave it with this. Okay, thank you for answering. I'm just going to leave it with this. I would love to debate you, Vosh. I would absolutely love to debate you sometime, but I'll leave it with that.
Oh, well, send me an email sometime. I can't make any promises, but it's not impossible.
I might just.
Appreciate you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Vosh. It's hard to get people to have debates on really anything because everything is so polarized now. So I really appreciate you doing this. Thank you.
Sorry I couldn't do it earlier, because I know initially the idea was like Tuesday 2 weeks ago, but then
Yeah.
something changed and then it just da-da-da. Well, anyway, thank you for having me.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And September worked way, way better for me anyway.
You sounded lispy? Whatever. I mean, whatever. Anyway, what a lunatic, huh? Yeah, did you know America is an empire? Okay, so like as is often the case, libertarianism is used as a front for far-right ideology. That guy was like a perfect example of it, because so I think like it's very obvious when you see and you notice that guy's ideology would be like speed running nuclear Armageddon, because he's literally like, no country should form alliances or defend ourselves, and like, hey man, if you get invaded by your neighbor, good luck. And then like the whole world gets gobbled up by their neighbors, and it leads to inevitable conflict, like literally inevitable. You know, even back in the Middle Ages, they still had national alliances. This would be like beyond anything. And I think the reason he believes all this stuff is I mean, a lot of it's because it's like incoherent ideology or whatever, but a lot of it is also because it's kind of like permission giving to far right. You know, I think a lot of far right people kind of want everything to be destroyed and for like super ultra far right ideology to rise from the ashes. So it's like, oh, well, this may destroy the world or whatever, but maybe like the white man will come back. I don't know if that guy had much like racial ideology behind him, but maybe. Accelerationist. I don't even know if maybe it's like accelerationism except towards bad things. I have no idea. He would have literally been anti-American Revolution because I'm in Georgia. That's New England's problem. Yeah, the idea of like not having any kind of national alliances is just so silly. Vosh, when she said gayer than AIDS, that was redheaded libertarian. She's almost certainly a Nazi. Anyway, yeah, I knew that'd be a shit show. I had a lot of fun. I feel like the best thing I could have done there, or the reason I went so hard on that like America last shit is because once I realized this guy's ideology was so incoherent that he couldn't really elaborate on it or answer hypotheticals, and when I realized that he knew his ideology was incoherent because he stopped like elaborating when I asked for explanations, I decided the best that I could really do is kind of like harp in on the idea that he wants to, yeah. You might as well make it funny if it's going to be like worthless. When he called you a neocon, well, the people who use neocon as a like insult most often, first of all, neocons are monsters, so I'm fine with them being insulted, right? But the people who use the insult most often are like Nazi types, because they hate the idea of like cuck conservatives who claim to be on the right, but they're actually in favor of like support to Israel or like international relations or whatever. Yeah, it's like it's getting called a rhino basically, because the idea that international alliances is neoconservative is psychotic. All ideologies allow for international alliances. No, I checked his Twitter beforehand. It's literally like full on psychotic like schizo bullshit. Yeah, only so much you can really do to like engage with that. Anyway, in case anyone is watching this and actually looking for some kind of resolution or like good information at the end of this, okay, the reason why that guy kept focusing on stuff like moral right and interfering in others' business is because he was trying to distract from the fundamental moral question, which is it right to help an ally, you know? And the answer is yes. If you believe in assisting allies when the allies' cause is just, like if the allies' cause is just, assisting them is just, on almost all circumstances. But he wants to frame it as though it's like an extension of American empire, you know? The problem is that anything that benefits America abroad is an extension of American empire. All of it. Because obviously, like if anything happens internationally and it's to our benefit, that's an extension of American empire. Is he a tanky? No, he's a far right dude, like far right lunatic. Again, the majority of like pro-Russian weird like America third positionist talking points you hear these days are from Nazis, not from tankies. When you said the world needs a unifying force, it came out really bad, I think. I don't think so. No. The unifying force is just like international alliance. I think you have to be acting in deliberately bad faith to misinterpret that, but all the people who are going to disagree with me on that, the only people who can disagree with me on this are lunatics. Like I was arguing with a guy who was posting conspiracies about Azov battalion dudes at Jan 6, and he was arguing that legitimately the best and most peaceful world would be one in which there are no alliances, and if you get invaded, good luck. Like I'm not dealing with serious people here with serious ideologies. It's all clown show shit. So I don't think anything I said there came off even remotely bad. Yeah, he was. Yeah, exactly. He was arguing for U.S. and China to eat everything until we square off at the end of the world. Exactly. So that one guy in the Q&A was really funny too. The guy who just wanted to ramble about like insane libertarian, like economic theories that no one takes seriously. And he's like, how do you dispute the fact that? And he's got like 5 minutes, as Ron Paul said. And then my answer is just like, I don't care. Glory to the proletariat. And he was like, oh, so you're an admitted commie. He's like, Jesus Christ. What were those questions? Again, it's redheaded libertarian. Her audience is going to mostly be nutcases. And there were only about 1,000 people listening to the space. Those people are going to be like the hardline ideologues, you know? It's not like people watching me right now are pretty ideologically motivated, of course, but there's enough like leeway that a lot of people watching right now are probably just casual viewers. Most of the people who are watching that would be like lunatics. So naturally, when like a call comes in, they're going to be lunatics. Oh, she's like a Tim Pool orbiter? No. She works with Tim Pool. She's on his show pretty frequently. She's a contributor. Can you simultaneously scale down American hegemony while also preventing Russian or Chinese expansion? Yes, with alliances. That's the only way to do it. If you want to scale down American hegemony, what you want to do is you want to have us reach out and form mutually codependent alliances with many countries so that rather than it being America dictating everything, instead it becomes like a plurality of nations working together. You know? That's how you do it. Yeah. That's the whole point of all of this. Wet Ass Ben, wait, hold on. Wet Ass Ben says some of his conspiracies are easily debunkable. No. You have to understand what kind of person you're talking to, okay? Every single time we went down a rabbit hole with that guy, I know how to argue with conspiracy theorists. When you get down into the rabbit hole, it's a total waste of time. When they bring up like here's 17 like bullshit propaganda arguments, like you have to ignore them. Because if you try to engage with them, then all you do is run down like an ever fractally growing dialogue tree where you're going to spend an infinite amount of time like the idea would be that I would say like, no, actually that's been disproven because of this and this, and then he would go like, oh, I guess you're right. But that's like the fantasy version of how this happens. In reality, it would be like I would say I would debunk it, and then he would either say like no, or he would like pivot to a different thing, or he would pretend that he didn't hear me. Like it never goes out that way, you know? You want to maintain really, really, really strong control over the topic of discussion and not allow it to deviate too much. Yeah, calling us incels. I did think it was very funny how Maddie got with the America First thing. The funny thing is that it really plays into my framing too, because he was pretending to be against American empire and against like American hegemony, but then he kept saying America first. Why would a libertarian give a about America, you know? I should have asked him how he feels about open borders. That's always a really fun, like immediate way of working out who's a fake libertarian. What's the Ukrainian biolab stuff? It was a talking point so ridiculous that even the Kremlin didn't keep it up. It was the idea that Russia had discovered biolabs where Ukrainian and American scientists were working on creating a specific disease that would kill ethnically Russian people and no one else. That's not how disease works. It's completely psychotic. Like a bioweapon that targets Russians. But it was such a stupid conspiracy theory that it's like Metal Gear Solid shit. That even Russia didn't keep it up. They said it a couple of times and then they dropped it because it was so dumb, you know? But he's still parroting it. Like that's the kind of person we're dealing with here. Anyway, this was a total shit show, but I thought it was pretty fun and informative, kind of a little bit. I hope you guys had fun. We have fun?